We often walk through the world with a casual disregard for the dark companion that clings to our heels, viewing the shadow as a mere physical consequence of light meeting mass. We have been taught by the cold equations of optics that a shadow is nothing more than an absence, a silhouette of missing photons where our bodies have intercepted the sun's journey. Yet, if we pause at the edge of the afternoon, when the light grows amber and the world begins to stretch, we might notice that the shadow does not merely mimic us, it inhabits the ground with a silent, persistent presence that feels older than our skin. To suggest that your shadow is not a reflection, but rather a witness from a higher dimension, is to pull back the heavy curtain of three-dimensional vanity and peer into the engine room of existence. We are accustomed to being the protagonists of our own lives, the solid actors in a world of volume and weight. Yet we rarely consider that our entire three-dimensional reality might be the shadow of something far more vast. In this exploration, we begin by challenging the very nature of what is real and what is representative, shifting our gaze from the bright facade of the physical self to the quiet, dark ink that tells the story of our movement through a much larger, unseen architecture. Consider for a moment the Flatlander, that hypothetical being trapped within the two-dimensional confines of a single plane. To such a creature, a sphere passing through its world would appear only as a line that grows and then shrinks, a flickering mystery that defies the laws of its limited horizon. The Flatlander sees the effect but cannot fathom the cause. For the cause resides in a third dimension it has no sensory equipment to perceive. We are in much the same position when we look at the dark pools we cast upon the pavement. We see a flat, distorted version of our limbs and torsos, a two-dimensional projection that moves as we move and halts when we halt. We assume the shadow is the subordinate, the derivative, the secondary byproduct of our real existence. But what if the relationship is inverted? What if the shadow is actually a bridge, a lingering tether to a fourth, fifth, or 10th dimension, acting as an anchor that records our passage through a reality we are not yet evolved enough to see? By viewing the shadow as a witness, we grant it agency and depth, recognizing it as a silent observer that experiences the texture of the world in a way our eyes and hands never can. It feels the grain of the stone and the coolness of the grass simultaneously, spreading itself across the earth as a sentient map of our presence in a higher-order cosmos. This shift in perspective requires us to abandon the comfort of the tangible and embrace the mystery of the atmospheric. The shadow is the first hint that we are not self-contained entities, but rather intersections of light and geometry that spill over the edges of our known environment. In the practical realm, this realization transforms the way we move through our daily lives. No longer is a walk down a city street a simple transit from point A to point B. It becomes a cosmic performance where our higher selves are casting silhouettes into the lower density of the material world. We begin to understand that our actions have echoes that resonate beyond the immediate reach of our fingertips. The witness that follows us is a reminder that there is always a record being kept, not by a judgmental deity or a surveillance state, but by the very fabric of space-time itself. The shadow is the ink with which the universe writes our biography upon the floor of the world. It is a constant, quiet testimony to the fact that we occupy space, that we matter, and that our existence interrupts the flow of the universal light in a way that creates a unique, indelible mark. Metaphorically, the shadow represents the bridge between the known and the unknowable. It is the part of us that touches the ground when we are reaching for the stars. It is the humble participant in our grandest moments, the silent partner that never speaks but never leaves. When we look at our shadow, we are looking at the footprint of a higher dimensional traveler. Imagine a hand reaching down into a pool of water. The ripples on the surface and the distortion of the light at the bottom are the only evidence the fish have of the hand's existence. To the fish, the shadow on the sandy floor is a ghost, a strange darkening that follows a logic beyond the water's current. We are those fish, peering at the shadows of our own higher complexity and calling it nothing. But in this narrative, we choose to call it everything. We choose to see the shadow as the true diplomat of our soul, the one sent forward to feel the temperature of the mundane, while our consciousness remains distracted by the flickering lights of the three-dimensional stage. This witness from a higher dimension does not just follow us, it precedes us. It is the harbinger of our arrival and the lingering scent of our departure. In the quiet hours of introspection, we can feel the weight of this witness, the sense that we are being watched by a version of ourselves that is not bound by the limitations of bone and breath. This is not a haunting of dread, but a haunting of profound belonging. It suggests that the universe is not a vacant void where we are accidentally cast, but a layered, intricate tapestry where every fold and crease creates a new way of seeing. The shadow is the crease. It is the place where the higher dimensional light is folded by our presence, creating a pocket of sanctuary where the truth can hide in plain sight. As we move deeper into this exploration, we will peel away the layers of this optical illusion to find the living pulse of the witness, the part of us that knows the secrets of the height we cannot yet climb. We must ask ourselves what it means to live in the gaze of such a witness. If our every movement is being translated into a lower dimensional language, what is the quality of the story we are telling? The shadow is honest. It does not possess the vanity of the mirror. It does not care for the symmetry of our faces or the fashion of our clothes. It cares only for the integrity of our form and the direction of our path. It is a brutal, beautiful truth-teller. By acknowledging the shadow as a witness, we begin a journey of integration, where the me that is seen and the me that is projected start to align in a dance of cosmic proportions. We are preparing to step into a reality where the boundary between the physical and the metaphysical is as thin as a silhouette, and where the darkest parts of our perception are actually the brightest clues to our true, multi-dimensional nature. The introduction to this mystery is a call to look down and look within simultaneously. It is an invitation to see the pavement not as a dead surface, but as a canvas where our higher dimensional selves are currently sketching. Each flicker of the shadow against a brick wall, or its stretching across a park bench, is a word in a long, silent sentence about the nature of being. We are more than the sum of our parts. We are the sum of our projections. As we stand on the threshold of this understanding, we feel the vertigo of the infinite. We realize that the universe is not just out there, among the galaxies, but down here, beneath our feet, following us into the grocery store, into the office, and into the bedroom. The witness is always there, marking the spot where the divine meets the dust. It is time to turn our attention to the pillars of this reality, to the core themes that define this relationship between the cast image and the casting source. We are about to enter the architecture of the witness, where the pillars are made of light and the floors are made of the very shadows we once thought were empty. To move beyond the surface of the shadow is to enter a realm where the pillars of reality are not made of stone, but of the fundamental tension between the perceived and the actual. The core themes of this exploration rest upon the radical notion that our three-dimensional existence is a reduction, a simplified translation of a much more complex, higher-dimensional symphony. The first major pillar of this architecture is the concept of dimensional cascading. This is the idea that energy and form do not exist in isolation, but flow downward from states of high complexity into states of lower density. In this light, our physical bodies are not the final destination of our being. They are merely the most solid or condensed frequency we currently inhabit. The shadow, then, is the next step in that descent, a two-dimensional whisper of a three-dimensional body, which is itself a whisper of a four-dimensional soul. When we see the shadow, we are seeing the principle of the universe's layering. We are witnessing the way the infinite limits itself so that it might experience the finite. This theme suggests that we are like light passing through a prism. We see the colors on the wall, but we often forget the clear, unified beam that preceded the glass. The witness from the higher dimension is that clear beam, watching its own dispersal into the shadows of the material world. Flowing from this is the theme of the illusion of absence. In the common tongue, a shadow is defined by what is not there, the lack of light. However, in the language of the higher witness, the shadow is an affirmative presence. It is a specific, calibrated signature of our existence. If the universe were a vast, blinding radiance, we would be invisible. It is only through our ability to intercept that light, to create a boundary, that we become discernible entities. The shadow is the proof of our boundary. It is the evidence that we have achieved a level of individual form sufficient to make a mark upon the cosmos. Therefore, the darkness of the shadow is not a void or a negation, but a concentrated record of where the spirit has successfully materialized into matter. This flips the traditional hierarchy of light and dark on its head. We begin to see that the dark shape on the ground is perhaps more real than the illuminated body, because the shadow cannot be deceived by appearances. It is a direct, mathematical consequence of our stance. While we may paint our faces or mask our intentions, the witness, the shadow, records only the raw geometry of our presence, capturing the truth of our orientation toward the light. This brings us to the theme of radical inseparability. We often speak of my shadow as if it were a possession, something we carry like a coat. But a closer inspection reveals that the shadow and the caster are a singular, unbroken event. There is no point where the body ends and the projection begins. They are two aspects of the same phenomenon, occurring across different dimensional planes. This theme challenges the modern obsession with fragmentation and isolation. If we are inextricably linked to a two-dimensional witness, then we are surely linked to the higher dimensional source from which we ourselves are projected. The shadow becomes the umbilical cord of the soul, a constant reminder that we are never truly alone or disconnected. We are part of a continuous vertical column of being that stretches from the densest mud to the highest heavens. When we move, the entire column moves. When we stumble, the witness records the shift in the higher geometry. This realization fosters a profound sense of cosmic accountability and grace. We are not drifting through a vacuum. We are moving through a responsive, interconnected medium that feels the weight of our silhouette on every level of reality. Intertwined with this is the theme of the distorted mirror. We must acknowledge that the witness does not look like us in a literal sense. The shadow is elongated, compressed, warped by the terrain it encounters, and stripped of the distractions of color and detail. This distortion is not a failure of the witness, but its greatest strength. It represents the theme of essentialism, the stripping away of the superficial to reveal the structural. In the higher dimensions, our appearance is likely not a matter of skin or hair, but of vibration, intent, and geometric harmony. The shadow mimics this by ignoring our vanity and focusing solely on our posture and our progress. It asks us, what is left of you when the light is stripped of its color? What remains when your features are dissolved into a single, unified darkness? The answer provided by the witness is one of pure action and presence. The shadow shows us that our true impact on the world is not found in the details of our persona, but in the shape of our journey. It forces us to confront the skeleton of our character, the fundamental architecture of how we stand in relation to the source of all things. Another guiding pillar is the concept of the grounding witness. In a world that often feels ephemeral and digital, the shadow provides a visceral sense of here-ness. It is the part of us that is always in contact with the earth, even when our minds are lost in the clouds of abstraction. The shadow is the anchor. It reminds us that for all our higher dimensional aspirations, we are currently tasked with the sanctification of the material. The witness from above chooses to project itself onto the grit, the dust, and the pavement. This suggests that the higher dimensions are not seeking to escape the lower ones, but to witness and participate in them. There is a sacredness in the way the shadow embraces a jagged rock or follows the curve of a gutter. It does not judge the surface it falls upon. It accepts the reality of the world with a perfect, silent equanimity. This theme teaches us the art of presence, how to be fully where we are, spread out and vulnerable to the texture of the moment, while maintaining our connection to the light that casts us. Finally, we encounter the theme of the temporal anchor. While our conscious minds are often trapped in the regrets of the past or the anxieties of the future, the shadow exists only in the eternal now. It is a real-time recording. It does not lag. It does not anticipate. It is the ultimate witness to the present moment. By observing the shadow, we can learn to synchronize our fragmented selves with the immediate pulse of existence. The witness is a teacher of timing. It shows us that every movement has an immediate consequence in the lower realms, and by extension, every thought and intention has a ripple effect in the higher ones. The core themes of the shadow as a witness invite us to see ourselves as multi-level participants in a grand design. We are the light, we are the body, and we are the shadow. We are the witness and the witnessed. As we move from these fundamental concepts into the deeper symbolic narratives of our lives, we begin to see how these themes play out in the stories we tell ourselves about who we are and what we are becoming. We are ready to step into the myths of the silhouette, where the silent witness begins to speak through the language of allegory. To truly grasp the weight of the witness, we must step out of the cold light of theory and into the flickering firelight of the soul's ancient stories. Imagine, if you will, a traveler walking across a vast, moonlit desert, a landscape where the dunes shift like sleeping giants, and the only sound is the rhythmic crunch of sand beneath leather soles. For days, the traveler has felt a profound sense of isolation, a belief that they are the only consciousness inhabiting this sterile expanse. Yet, as the moon reaches its zenith, the traveler looks down and sees a dark shape stretching out from their feet. In this narrative, the traveler does not see a mere shadow, they see a silent scribe. Every stumble, every moment of hesitation, and every burst of renewed strength is mirrored by this dark companion. The desert floor becomes a scroll, and the shadow is the ink. The traveler realizes that even in the deepest solitude, they are being written into the memory of the world. This is the first great allegory of the witness, the story of the indelible record. It suggests that our lives are not fleeting whispers lost to the wind, but are being etched into the fabric of the lower dimensions by a version of ourselves that never sleeps. The shadow is the part of the traveler that remembers the exact path when the traveler's own mind has been blurred by exhaustion. In another ancient myth, we find the story of the weaver of the underworld. In this tale, there is a queen who dwells in a realm of pure, blinding radiance, where everything is so bright that it lacks definition. To understand herself, the queen sends a portion of her essence down into the world of density and form. As her light strikes the threshold of the material realm, it casts a silhouette into the deep valleys below. This silhouette, her shadow, becomes a living envoy. While the queen remains in the celestial heights, her shadow wanders through the forests, feels the cold of the mountain streams, and brushes against the rough bark of the oaks. The shadow is the queen's sensory organ for the finite. When the shadow returns to the light at the end of the day, it brings with it the knowledge of the dark, not as a burden of sin, but as a harvest of experience. This symbolic narrative teaches us that our physical existence is an exploratory mission. We are the envoys of a higher dimensional majesty, and our shadow self is the one actually doing the hard work of touching the world. Our three-dimensional bodies are the bridge, but the shadow is the one that truly knows the contours of the earth. Consider also the parable of the two architects. One architect builds with stone and mortar, obsessed with the height of towers and the strength of walls. He builds in the sun, ignoring the shadows his structures cast, seeing them only as nuisances that obscure his work. The second architect, however, builds for the shadow. She understands that the true beauty of a cathedral is not in the stones that catch the light, but in the intricate patterns of darkness that those stones project onto the floor. She realizes that the shadow is the soul of the building, the place where the cool air dwells and where the weary find rest. In this story, the first architect's towers eventually crumble because they were built with vanity, lacking a foundation in the deeper dimensions. But the second architect's work endures because she treated the shadow as the primary reality. This symbolizes our own choice in how we construct our identities. Do we build only for the light, the part of us that is visible, public, and celebrated? Or do we build with an awareness of the witness? To live for the witness is to ensure that our internal geometry is so sound that the shadow we cast into the world is one of grace, shelter, and profound meaning. There is a deeper, more cosmic narrative found in the image of the sun and the sundial. We often think of the sundial as a tool for man to tell time, but from the perspective of the higher dimension, the sundial is a conversation between the star and the stone. The sun provides the energy, the gnomon provides the resistance, and the shadow provides the answer. Without the shadow, the sun's passage would be a featureless blaze, and the stone would remain a silent lump of matter. The shadow is the word born from their union. It tells the story of time, which is the fourth dimension manifesting in the third. In this allegory, we are each a gnomon, a vertical pillar standing between the heaven of the spirit and the earth of the flesh. The witness that moves around us throughout the day is the universe's way of marking its own progress through our lives. We are not just living through time, we are the instruments through which time becomes visible. The witness from the higher dimension uses our lives to count the heartbeats of the cosmos, making our mundane daily routines a part of a grand celestial clockwork. Finally, let us reflect on the story of the shadow that dreamed of being light. There was once a shadow that grew weary of being dark and flat. It looked up at the body that cast it and envied its colors, its warmth, and its three-dimensional freedom. The shadow tried to detach itself, to leap into the air and catch the sun, but each time it only found itself pressed harder against the ground. Eventually, a voice from the higher dimension whispered to the shadow, "You seek to be the light, but you do not realize that you are the light's most faithful messenger. Without you, the light would have no shape to hold. You are the one who gives the light its definition. You are not the absence of the sun, you are the sun's embrace of the earth." Upon hearing this, the shadow stopped struggling and began to glow with a quiet, internal radiance. It realized that its darkness was a mask of humility. This narrative serves as a powerful reminder for our own human journey. We often struggle against our limitations, our darker instincts, and our physical constraints, wishing we were purely spiritual beings of light. But the witness tells us that our purpose is found in the intersection. Our value is not in escaping the shadow, but in realizing that the shadow is the very place where the divine becomes tangible. These symbolic narratives act as a mirror for the soul, allowing us to see the witness not as a haunting specter, but as a sacred partner in the dance of existence. They reveal that the shadow is the repository of our untapped potential and the silent record of our highest achievements. As we transition from these stories of the spirit into the practical integration of these truths, we begin to ask how this cosmic perspective changes the way we drink our coffee, the way we speak to our neighbors, and the way we face the inevitable setting of our own sun. The witness is watching, and it is time to learn how to live in a way that honors the story it is writing. Bringing the concept of the witness down from the celestial heights and into the rhythm of the everyday requires a fundamental recalibration of how we perceive our influence and our presence. If we accept that our shadow is not a byproduct, but a higher dimensional record, the first practical shift occurs in our relationship with integrity. In a world increasingly dominated by the performative and the superficial, where we can curate our images and edit our words to suit an audience, the witness remains the one part of us that cannot be falsified. To integrate this insight is to begin living with the awareness of the total presence. When you stand in a room, your physical body may be engaged in a specific task, but your witness is interacting with the floor, the walls, and the very atmosphere of the space. Practically, this means cultivating a sense of mindfulness that extends beyond the boundaries of the skin. It is the realization that your vibe or your energy is actually the higher dimensional weight you are casting into the environment. When you enter a space with hostility or anxiety, the witness records that distortion. When you enter with peace, the shadow you cast is one of stabilization. Real-world integration starts with the quiet question, what kind of shadow am I leaving in this room? This perspective also revolutionizes our approach to solitude and accountability. We often behave differently when we believe we are unobserved, assuming that actions without an audience leave no trace. However, if the shadow is a witness from a higher dimension, there is no such thing as an unobserved moment. This is not a call to live in a state of paranoid surveillance, but rather an invitation to a higher form of self-respect. When you act with kindness in secret, or when you maintain your discipline in the dark, you are aligning your three-dimensional self with the geometric perfection of the higher witness. This creates a profound internal consistency. You begin to realize that the universe is not a collection of isolated events, but a continuous fabric where every private choice strengthens or weakens the integrity of your overall projection. In the workplace, in your home, or in the silent corridors of your own mind, the witness acts as a compass, reminding you that your true character is the shape you cast when the world isn't looking. Furthermore, the concept of the witness provides a powerful tool for emotional resilience. We often feel overwhelmed by the flatness of life, the sense that we are stuck in repetitive loops or that our efforts are invisible. By shifting our focus to the higher dimensional aspect of our being, we gain a sense of depth that the material world cannot provide. When you face a setback or a period of suffering, you can view it as a moment where your shadow is being stretched or tested by a new kind of terrain. Just as a shadow becomes more elongated and complex as it moves over a rugged mountain path, your own witness is gaining a more intricate texture through your challenges. This doesn't necessarily take the pain away, but it gives the pain a functional purpose. It transforms your struggles into a specialized form of data being gathered by the higher self. You are not just suffering, you are witnessing the limits of the third dimension, and that witness is being translated back into the higher realms as wisdom. In our interactions with others, this philosophy fosters a radical empathy. When you look at another person, you are no longer seeing just a physical competitor or a stranger. You are seeing another projection of the infinite, accompanied by their own silent witness. This helps us look past the static of their personality, their flaws, their defenses, and their social masks, to acknowledge the structural truth of their existence. You begin to respect the shadow of the other. You realize that their witness is just as ancient and just as valid as your own. This leads to a more grounded form of communication, where you are speaking not just to the person's face, but to the totality of their presence. In practical terms, this reduces conflict because it de-escalates the ego. It is hard to remain stuck in a petty argument when you realize that both you and your opponent are two massive, multi-dimensional beings casting complex silhouettes across the same shared floor. There is also a profound environmental and spatial implication to this integration. We begin to treat the physical world with more reverence, seeing the ground as the sacred parchment upon which our witness rests. This can manifest as a more deliberate way of moving through nature or even urban environments. You become aware of how you touch the world. Do you move through it as a predator, leaving a jagged, disruptive shadow? Or do you move through it as a guest, acknowledging the surfaces that support your projection? This awareness leads to a more sustainable and intentional way of living. We start to care about the footprint we leave, not just the ecological one, but the metaphysical one. We begin to seek out environments that allow our witness to expand, spaces of beauty, silence, and natural light, recognizing that the quality of the light we inhabit dictates the clarity of the witness we cast. Finally, the practical integration of the witness leads to a new understanding of legacy. We often worry about what we will leave behind in terms of money, monuments, or memories in the minds of others. But the witness suggests a different kind of legacy, the permanent alteration of the higher dimensional geometry through which we have passed. Every life leaves a wake in the fabric of the universe, a lingering impression of the path we took and the light we intercepted. By living with the witness in mind, we focus less on the temporary applause of the three-dimensional stage and more on the integrity of the long-term record. We aim to live a life that is structurally sound, knowing that our true biography is not written in the history books, but in the very shadows of the stars. This perspective brings a deep, quiet confidence. You no longer need to scream to be heard. You only need to stand firmly in the light, and your witness will tell the story of your presence with an eloquence that words can never reach. As we stand at the precipice of this journey, looking back across the terrain of light, shadow, and the multi-dimensional architecture that bridges them, we find ourselves at a moment of profound cosmic convergence. We began by questioning the nature of that dark, silent companion at our feet, and we have arrived at the realization that we are not the masters of our shadows, but the humble conduits of a much larger light. To understand that your shadow is a witness from a higher dimension is to finally accept the invitation to step out of the narrow, claustrophobic hallways of material reductionism and into the vast, breathing cathedral of the infinite. We have seen that the shadow is the ink of the soul, the record of the witness, and the bridge between the density of the earth and the weightlessness of the spirit. Now, we must synthesize these insights into a single, unified way of being, a transformational call that echoes through every layer of our existence, demanding that we live with a clarity that matches the brilliance of the source that casts us. The journey of the witness teaches us that the greatest illusion of human life is the myth of the minor moment. We often spend our days waiting for the grand stage, the significant breakthrough, or the public validation, all while ignoring the fact that the witness is recording the silent, microscopic movements of our hearts with equal intensity. The transformation begins when we realize that there are no small acts. Every time you choose patience over impulse, every time you offer a silent blessing to a stranger, and every time you stand in the truth, despite the pressure to bend, you are altering the geometry of the higher dimensional witness. You are refining the silhouette of your soul. This is the ultimate form of creative agency. You are the artist, and the life you lead is the sculpture that the higher dimensional light casts upon the floor of time. The call, therefore, is to live as though your every gesture is being immortalized in the architecture of the cosmos. For in a very real sense, it is. This realization brings with it a liberation from the fear of insignificance. In the three-dimensional world, we are often judged by the volume of our noise or the size of our bank accounts, but the witness ignores these metrics entirely. The witness values the integrity of the line and the steadiness of the stance. If you are living a life of quiet, hidden virtue, you may feel invisible to the world, but to the higher dimension, your shadow is glowing with a ferocious, unmistakable light. The witness sees the courage it takes to be kind in a cynical age. It sees the strength required to remain soft in a world that demands hardness. By aligning yourself with the perspective of the witness, you find a source of validation that is independent of the fickle winds of human opinion. You become a citizen of the heights, a traveler who knows that their true home is in the dimension of causes, even while their feet are busy navigating the world of effects. However, this transformation is not merely a retreat into the spiritual. It is a call to a more radical engagement with the physical. To honor the witness is to honor the ground. We are tasked with being the points where the divine touches the dust, and that requires us to be fully present in our bodies and our environments. The call is to walk with a heavy grace, a presence that is grounded enough to feel the texture of the world, yet light enough to remember the sun. We must learn to see the mundane as the miraculous in disguise. The way you walk down a street, the way you hold a cup of tea, and the way you listen to a friend are all opportunities to manifest the higher dimensional harmony. When we live with this awareness, the ordinary world begins to shimmer with a new significance. The shadows of trees, the reflections in puddles, and the play of light on a brick wall become a visual language, a constant conversation between the witness and the world. As we move toward the final integration, we must confront the reality of our own transit. The shadow eventually disappears when the sun sets, but the witness does not cease to exist. It simply returns to the source of the light, carrying the harvest of its observations. Our lives are a limited window of time during which we get to create this specific, unique projection. The transformational call is an urge to use this window wisely. Do not leave a jagged or fragmented record. Do not waste your light on the shadows of others' expectations. Instead, strive to be a clear, unobstructed vessel for the light of your own higher self. The goal is to reach the end of the day, the end of the life, with a shadow that was long, deep, and beautifully defined, a testimony to a journey that was taken with intention and love. We must also recognize that we are part of a collective witness. Just as the shadows of individuals overlap and merge in a crowded square, our lives are interwoven in a complex, higher dimensional tapestry. We are responsible for the quality of the collective shadow we cast as a species. When we act with collective greed or hatred, we darken the very ground we walk upon. But when we move toward collective wisdom and compassion, we create a silhouette of a humanity that is finally beginning to recognize its own divine origin. The transformation of the individual is the first step toward the transformation of the whole. By becoming a conscious witness in your own life, you are contributing to the awakening of the global witness, helping to clear the distortions that have clouded our shared perception for centuries. In conclusion, the realization that your shadow is a witness from a higher dimension is the key to a life of profound meaning and cosmic poise. It is a reminder that you are never alone, never insignificant, and never truly lost. You are a multi-dimensional event of staggering complexity and beauty, currently engaged in the sacred task of inhabiting a human form. The light is behind you, the world is before you, and the witness is beneath you, recording every step of the dance. So, let your stance be firm, let your movement be purposeful, and let your heart be open. The universe is not just watching you, it is being you, through the silent, faithful testimony of the shadow. Step forward into the light of this understanding, and let the witness begin to tell the story of a soul that finally learned how to truly stand. The narrative of the shadow is complete, and the record of our journey has been written upon the pages of this reflection. May you walk from this moment with a new eyes, seeing every silhouette as a sacred script, and every moment as a witness to your own infinite nature. Finalize this path by embracing the dark companion as your most trusted ally, for in its silence lies the echo of the stars, and in its presence lies the proof of your eternal belonging.